The morning sun barely peeked over the trees when screams broke the peaceful quiet of Meadow Creek. Connor Adams dropped his wood axe and ran toward the sound. People were pointing and shouting near the village square. Connor pushed through the growing crowd and froze. There, trapped between the water well and Old Man Wilson's storage crates, stood a massive brown bear. "Stay back," Connor shouted, waving his arms at the children who had come to look. "Someone get Savannah." The bear huffed and paced in circles, her thick fur dusty and her eyes wild with fear. She rose on her hind legs, towering over everyone, and let out a deep roar that shook the windows of nearby houses. Mothers grabbed their children and pulled them inside. Men rushed forward with pitchforks and shovels. "Don't hurt her." Savannah Reed pushed through the crowd, her long braid swinging behind her. As the village's only animal expert, people made way for her. "She's scared," Savannah explained, studying the bear's movements. "Look at her teats. She's nursing. Her cubs must be somewhere in the forest." As if answering, distant cries echoed from the tree line. The mother bear's head snapped toward the sound, and she pawed desperately at the ground, trying to find a way out. But villagers had formed a circle, and every time she moved toward an escape, someone shouted and waved tools in the air. "She wandered in looking for food," Savannah whispered to Connor. "Now she's trapped and terrified. Bears don't usually come this close unless they're desperate." Connor nodded, watching as the bear became more agitated. "What should we do? We can't let her charge at anyone." Before Savannah could answer, a collective gasp rose from the crowd. A tiny figure had broken free from the circle and was walking directly toward the bear. 2-year-old Lily Morgan, with her curly blonde hair and blue overalls, toddled forward on unsteady legs. In her small hand, she clutched half a honey biscuit. Lily, no exclamation mark, Jacob Bennett, her uncle, lunged forward but stopped when the bear turned her massive head toward the approaching child. Time seemed to freeze. The mother bear's dark eyes locked onto Lily. Everyone held their breath. No one dared move for fear of triggering the bear's protective instincts. Lily showed no fear. She simply smiled, her innocent face glowing with curiosity as she extended her small hand with the biscuit. "Bear hungry," she said in her baby voice that somehow carried across the silent square. The bear lowered herself to all fours, her nose twitching as she sniffed the air. She took one hesitant step toward Lily, then another. "Don't move," Savannah breathed, her heart pounding. "Nobody make a sound." Lily placed the biscuit on the ground and stepped back, her eyes never leaving the bear. Then she did something that made tears spring to Savannah's eyes. She sat down, cross-legged, and patted the dirt beside her, just as she did when inviting her stuffed animals to tea parties. The mother bear stretched her neck, sniffing the biscuit. With one quick movement, she scooped it up and ate it. Then, instead of charging or running, she simply watched Lily, her aggressive posture softening ever so slightly. "Bear sad," Lily said, pointing to the forest where the cubs' cries continued. "Baby bears crying." The mother bear huffed again, but the sound was different now, almost like a sigh. She looked from Lily to the forest and back again, as though the child's simple words had bridged some ancient gap between human and beast. What happened next would be told in Meadow Creek for generations to come. The mother bear slowly lowered herself to the ground, her massive body settling onto the dirt just a few feet from Lily. The crowd collectively held their breath. Connor gripped the handle of his axe so tightly his knuckles turned white, ready to rush forward if needed. Savannah put a restraining hand on his arm, her eyes never leaving the scene before them. "Bear tired," Lily said, her tiny voice somehow cutting through the tension. She patted the ground again, this time more gently. "Bear, miss babies." The mother bear made a low rumbling sound deep in her throat. It wasn't aggressive. It sounded almost like pain. Her eyes, deep pools of wilderness intelligence, remained fixed on the child. Somehow, this massive creature seemed to understand that this small human meant no harm. Jacob took a cautious step forward, desperate to grab his niece and pull her to safety, but Savannah shook her head sharply. "Don't," she whispered. "You might break whatever is happening here. She's calm now." The bear's ears twitched as the distant cries of her cubs grew more insistent. She looked toward the forest, then back at Lily, caught between maternal instinct and the strange spell of the moment. Lily reached into the pocket of her overalls and pulled out another small piece of honey biscuit. This time, instead of placing it on the ground, she held it out in her tiny palm. The adults watching nearly fainted with fear. "Lily, no," Jacob whispered hoarsely, but it was too late. The bear stretched her massive neck forward, her wet nose just inches from Lily's fingers. One snap of those powerful jaws could take the child's entire hand. Instead, with delicate precision that seemed impossible for such a large creature, the bear used only her lips to take the offering. Tears streamed down Savannah's face as she watched. "I've never seen anything like this," she murmured to Connor. "It's like they understand each other." Old Mrs. Wilson hobbled forward from her cottage, leaning heavily on her cane. At 87, she was the village's oldest resident, and had seen more winters than anyone else in Meadow Creek. "It's the innocence," she said softly, her wrinkled face reflecting wonder. "Bears sense intention better than any creature I know. That child has no fear, no hatred in her heart. The bear knows it." Lily giggled as the bear finished the biscuit, the sound bright and clear in the hushed square. Then she did something that made several women in the crowd cry out. She reached up and gently patted the bear's nose. "Go, babies, now," she said, pointing toward the forest. Babies crying. As if understanding the command, the bear lumbered to her feet. She looked at the circle of humans surrounding her, but the aggression had drained from her posture. Instead of fear and rage, her eyes now seemed to hold a strange sort of recognition, a temporary truce. Connor nudged Michael Hayes, the blacksmith's son who stood nearby with a pitchfork. "Move those crates, give her a path out." Without question, Michael and two other men hurried to shift the heavy wooden boxes that had been blocking the bear's escape route. They created a wide corridor leading toward the forest edge. The bear watched them work, her massive head turning to follow their movements. When the path was clear, she looked back at Lily one more time. The little girl smiled and waved her hand in a shooing motion. "Bye-bye, bear," she said simply. In a moment that defied every natural law of wild animals and humans, the mother bear dipped her head, almost like a nod, before turning and ambling toward the forest. She moved unhurriedly, with dignity, as the villagers stepped back to give her space. No one raised a weapon, no one shouted. They simply watched in awestruck silence. At the edge of the trees, the bear paused and raised her head, releasing a deep, rumbling call. Within moments, two small cubs tumbled out from the underbrush, racing to their mother with happy cries. The reunion brought fresh tears to many eyes, the mother nuzzling her babies, checking them over, before leading them deeper into the forest. As the bear family disappeared among the trees, the spell over the village square seemed to break. Jacob rushed forward and scooped Lily into his arms, hugging her fiercely. "Don't you ever do that again," he choked out, his voice breaking with emotion. "You nearly stopped my heart, little one." But Lily just giggled and patted his wet cheek. Bear was sad. Bear happy now. Word of what happened spread through Meadow Creek like wildfire. By nightfall, every household was talking about little Lily Morgan and the mother bear. Some called it a miracle, others a dangerous, foolish incident that had luckily ended well. But none could deny the power of what they had witnessed. That evening, as Savannah helped Jacob put Lily to bed in the small cottage they had shared since his sister, Lily's mother, had passed away during a harsh winter 2 years before, she found herself lingering by the child's bedside. "How did you know the bear wouldn't hurt you?" she asked softly, stroking Lily's curls. The little girl yawned and hugged her stuffed rabbit closer. Bear eyes sad, like Daddy's eyes, just needed help. Jacob, standing in the doorway, turned away quickly, but not before Savannah caught the gleam of tears. Since becoming Lily's guardian, Jacob had struggled with grief and the overwhelming responsibility of raising his sister's child alone. There were days when his eyes did indeed hold the same lost, desperate look the bear had shown. 3 days later, while gathering herbs at the forest edge, Savannah froze when she heard a rustling in the underbrush. Slowly, she turned to face the sound, her heart hammering. There, partially hidden by the trees, stood the mother bear with her cubs. They made no move to approach, simply watching her with intelligent eyes. "Hello again," Savannah said softly, remaining perfectly still. The mother bear huffed gently, her cubs playing at her feet. Then, in a gesture that Savannah would question for years afterward, the bear nudged one of her cubs forward. The little creature tumbled toward a blackberry bush just a few yards from where Savannah stood. With deliberate movements, the cub picked berries from the lower branches, eating some and dropping others on the ground before scampering back to its mother. After they disappeared into the forest, Savannah cautiously approached the bush. Beneath it lay a small pile of perfectly ripe blackberries, far more than the cub could have accidentally dropped. When Savannah returned to the village and told Jacob what she had seen, he shook his head in disbelief. "Are you saying the bear brought her child to what? Share food with us? Thank us?" Savannah placed the berries on the table. "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I know what I saw." That night, a powerful storm hit Meadow Creek. Rain pounded the thatched roofs, and wind howled through the village like a living thing. Jacob woke to a crash as a tree branch smashed through his barn roof. Racing outside in the downpour, he worked desperately to move his 2 goats and cow to safety as water poured into the damaged structure. A flash of lightning illuminated the yard, and Jacob froze. There, just beyond the fence line, stood a familiar silhouette, massive, 4-legged, unmistakable. The mother bear watched him struggle, her fur plastered to her body by the rain. "Go on! Get out of here!" Jacob shouted, more from instinct than fear. But the bear didn't flee. Instead, she lumbered forward, approaching the damaged barn. Jacob backed away, his heart pounding. Was she taking advantage of the chaos to search for food? Was the momentary peace broken? To his astonishment, the bear positioned herself beneath the largest gap in the roof. Then, with surprising agility, she stood on her hind legs and used her powerful front paws to push a dangling beam back into place. The piece of wood had been hanging precariously, threatening to collapse the entire roof structure. With the bear's adjustment, it settled back into a more stable position. Jacob stood transfixed, the rain soaking him to the skin, as the bear dropped back to all fours. She turned her head to look at him directly, their eyes meeting across the yard. Recognition passed between them. Not friendship exactly, but something deeper and more ancient. A connection that transcended the usual boundaries between human and wild animal. With a soft grunt, the bear turned and melted back into the storm, leaving Jacob questioning everything he thought he knew about the creatures that shared their forest. The next morning, Connor organized a group to repair Jacob's barn properly. As they worked, Lily played nearby, singing to herself and occasionally looking toward the forest with a knowing smile. "Bear helping," she announced suddenly, pointing to the repaired beam. "That's right, little one," Connor said, humoring her. "We're all helping fix Uncle Jacob's barn." But Lily shook her head, her curls bouncing. Number Big Bear helped. Nighttime. The men exchanged glances. Jacob had told no one about what he'd witnessed in the storm. "How do you know that, Lily?" Savannah asked gently, kneeling beside the child. Lily tapped her chest. "Bear told me. Here." That afternoon, Michael Hayes reported something strange at the village boundary. Deep paw prints in the mud circled the entire perimeter of Meadow Creek, as if something large had walked a protective path around the village during the storm. As summer faded into autumn, the villagers of Meadow Creek began to notice changes in the forest around them. Game was more plentiful, easier to hunt. Berry bushes seemed to produce more fruit. And strangely, other predators, the wolves that had sometimes threatened livestock, seemed to have moved to more distant parts of the forest. One crisp October morning, Jacob took Lily mushroom hunting along the safe edges of the forest. As they filled their basket with chanterelles, a shadow fell across the path. Jacob looked up, his heart leaping to his throat. The mother bear stood just 20 feet away, her cubs now noticeably larger than when they'd first seen them. Jacob instinctively pulled Lily behind him, but the little girl squirmed free and stepped forward with a happy cry. "Bear friend," she called out, waving enthusiastically. Jacob tensed, ready to snatch his niece to safety, but the bear made no threatening move. Instead, she watched them calmly, her cubs wrestling playfully nearby. After a moment, she grunted softly and turned away, leading her family deeper into the forest. That night, sitting by the fire in their cottage, Jacob finally asked the question that had been haunting him for months. "Lily, how did you know the bear wouldn't hurt you that day?" The little girl looked up from her wooden toys, her eyes reflecting wisdom far beyond her years. "Same eyes as Mama," she said simply. "In my dreams." Jacob's breath caught in his throat. Since her mother's death, Lily had often spoken of seeing her Mama in dreams, but he had always assumed it was a child's way of coping with loss. Now, he wasn't so sure. Winter came early that year, bringing heavy snows and bitter cold that tested the village's resources. Food stores ran low by January, and hunting parties returned with empty hands more often than not. The forest, usually generous, seemed to have gone silent under its white blanket. During the worst blizzard, when winds howled like hungry ghosts and snow piled against doors, someone pounded on Jacob's cottage in the middle of the night. He opened it to find Michael Hayes, his face red with cold and excitement. "Come quick," Michael gasped. "You won't believe what's at the village storehouse." Jacob bundled Lily in thick blankets and carried her through the storm. At the communal storage building where Meadow Creek kept its shared provisions, a small crowd had already gathered despite the late hour and terrible weather. "It started about an hour ago," Savannah explained as Jacob approached. "First just scratching, then heavier noises. Connor thought we were being raided by wolves or maybe desperate travelers." Connor Adams stood guard at the storehouse door, his face a mask of bewilderment. "See for yourself," he said, stepping aside. Jacob peered into the storehouse and nearly dropped Lily in shock. Piled near the entrance was the largest collection of winter game he had ever seen. Rabbits, pheasants, even a small deer, all freshly killed and carefully placed. Around the bounty, melting into the floorboards, were distinctive wet paw prints. "The bear?" Jacob whispered, unable to believe his eyes. "Has to be," Connor confirmed. No hunter would leave this without a word. and no other animal would stack its kill so deliberately. Lily squirmed in Jacob's arms. "Bear helping," she said sleepily. "Cold winter. Need food." The meat from the bear's gift kept Meadow Creek fed through the worst weeks of winter. By spring, the story had spread to neighboring villages, though few believed it. How could a wild bear, the very symbol of forest danger, become a guardian to human settlements? When the first green buds appeared on the trees, Jacob took Lily to the stream for her favorite activity, throwing pebbles into the rushing water. As she played, a familiar shape emerged from the tree line upstream. The mother bear looked thinner after the harsh winter, but her coat still shone healthily in the spring sunshine. Her cubs, nearly grown now, splashed playfully in the shallow parts of the stream, catching the season's first fish. "Bear Mama!" Lily called out happily, waving both arms. Jacob no longer felt fear, only a strange sense of kinship as he watched the bear teaching her young to fish. The mother bear looked up at Lily's call, her intelligent eyes seeming to recognize the child instantly. She huffed softly, almost like a greeting, before returning to her lesson. That evening, as the village gathered for the spring planting celebration, old Mrs. Wilson shuffled to the center of the circle. Though she rarely spoke at gatherings anymore, everyone fell silent when she raised her hand. "My grandmother told me a story when I was no bigger than little Lily," she began, her voice wavering but clear. "A story about the spirit bears that watch over those who show kindness to the forest. Once in many generations they reveal themselves to a pure heart." She fixed her milky eyes on Lily, who sat playing contentedly in Jacob's lap. "That child has her mother's gift. Jessica always could see deeper than most of us." Jacob felt a chill run down his spine at the mention of his sister's name. Jessica had indeed possessed an unusual connection with wild things. Birds that would eat from her hand, deer that didn't flee at her approach. He had almost forgotten. "What are you saying?" he asked carefully. Mrs. Wilson smiled, her wrinkled face crinkling. "I'm saying that bear recognized something in your Lily, something rare and precious, and now it seems we're under her protection." Summer brought abundant crops and mild weather. The forest seemed more generous than ever, offering berries, mushrooms, and game in quantities the village had never seen. And though children were still forbidden from wandering into the deep woods alone, parents no longer felt the same level of fear they once had. One warm afternoon, as Savannah helped Jacob repair his garden fence, she finally voiced the thought that had been growing in her mind for months. "I think you should consider marrying again, Jacob," she said quietly. "Lily needs a mother, and you shouldn't be alone forever." Jacob paused, a nail between his teeth. He studied Savannah's face, her kind eyes, the freckles across her nose, the strand of dark hair that had escaped her braid. Something shifted in his heart, like ice breaking in a spring thaw. "Are you offering?" he asked, only half joking. Savannah blushed, but held his gaze. "Maybe I am." Before Jacob could respond, Lily's excited voice called from near the forest edge. "Bear, bear babies." They rushed to find her standing just beyond the garden, pointing excitedly. There, at the tree line, stood the mother bear with her now adolescent cubs. But something was wrong. One of the cubs limped badly, blood matting the fur on its right hind leg. "It's injured," Savannah whispered. "Probably a hunting trap from one of the eastern villages." The mother bear's eyes met Jacob's across the distance. He could almost feel her plea. "She wants our help," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Are you mad?" Connor asked when Jacob explained his intention to treat the wounded cub. "That's still a wild bear, regardless of what's happened this past year." She's trusted us with her children before, Jacob argued, and we owe her our lives after the winter hunt she provided. In the end, Savannah's expertise with animals won the argument. They prepared a clearing near the forest edge with medical supplies and waited, hardly daring to believe the bear would understand. As the sun began to set, shadows emerged from the trees. The mother bear led her injured cub forward while keeping the healthy one back in the forest. She stopped at the edge of the clearing, watching the humans cautiously. "It's okay," Savannah said softly, kneeling on the ground with her supplies laid out. "We want to help." Lily broke away from Jacob's grasp and walked toward the bears, ignoring his desperate whisper to come back. "Fix bear, baby," she said confidently, looking up at the mother bear, "like Daddy fixed my knee." The mother bear made a rumbling sound deep in her throat. Then, with agonizing slowness, she nudged her injured cub forward toward Savannah. The young bear whimpered but obeyed its mother, limping into the clearing. What followed tested everything Savannah knew about treating animals. The wounded cub was frightened and in pain, but the mother bear kept it calm with soft grunts and occasional gentle cuffs when it tried to flee. Savannah worked quickly, removing metal trap fragments from the leg, cleaning the wound, and applying healing salves and bandages. Throughout the procedure, Jacob kept one hand on his knife and the other around Lily, ready to run if the mother bear's patience snapped. But the massive creature watched with an almost human understanding, occasionally pacing but never threatening. When Savannah finished, she sat back on her heels, exhausted. "That's all I can do. The leg isn't broken, thank goodness. With time and rest, the cub should heal completely." The mother bear approached her wounded offspring, sniffing the bandages carefully. Then she did something none of them expected. She turned to Savannah and lowered her massive head, gently pressing her forehead against Savannah's shoulder for the briefest moment before pulling back. "She's thanking you," Jacob whispered, tears springing to his eyes. Savannah could only nod, too overwhelmed to speak. The bears disappeared into the forest, but the bond between them and the village of Meadow Creek had been cemented. Over the coming months, villagers occasionally glimpsed the bear family, noting with satisfaction that the injured cub's limp gradually disappeared. By harvest time, Jacob had asked Savannah to marry him, and she had accepted. The day before their wedding, he took Lily to visit her mother's grave on the peaceful hillside overlooking the village. "Your mama would be so proud of you," he told the little girl as she carefully placed wildflowers on the simple stone marker. "You've brought something magical to our lives, little one." Lily smiled up at him, her innocent face serious for a moment. "Mama sent the bear," she said with complete conviction. "To watch us." A twig snapped in the nearby trees. Jacob looked up to see 3 bears standing at the forest edge, the mother and her 2 healthy cubs, now nearly as large as she was. They made no move to approach, simply watching the small human family with calm, intelligent eyes. Jacob raised his hand in greeting, no longer surprised by their appearance at significant moments. The mother bear raised her head, seeming to nod in return, before leading her family back into the shadows of the forest. That night, a storyteller from a distant village arrived for the wedding festivities. As the community gathered around the bonfire, he asked if anyone had local tales he might learn and share in his travels. Old Mrs. Wilson pointed to Lily, who was falling asleep in Connor's lap while the adults enjoyed the celebration. "That child has the best story in the county," she said, "about a mother bear who got trapped in our village and how a baby's kindness changed everything." As the storyteller leaned forward eagerly, Jacob caught Savannah's hand in his own. Together, they began to tell the tale that would soon spread throughout the region, a tale of fear transformed into understanding, of a child's innocent compassion, bridging the divide between human and wild, and of a mother's love that transcended species. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon hung full above Meadow Creek, villagers would hear a distant, huffing call from the forest, the mother bear reminding them of her watchful presence. Children no longer feared the sound. Instead, they would smile in their beds, comforted by the knowledge that somewhere in the dark woods, a most unlikely guardian kept them safe. Years passed. Lily grew into a young woman with her mother's gentle ways and her Uncle Jacob's quiet strength. Savannah and Jacob had 2 more children, a boy and a girl who grew up hearing the legend of their sister and the bear. The mother bear grew old, her once dark fur turning silver around her muzzle, but she never wandered far from Meadow Creek. On Lily's 18th birthday, she walked alone to the forest edge, drawn by some instinct she couldn't explain. There, she found an aged bear waiting in the shadows, somehow knowing she would come. "Hello, old friend," Lily said softly, no longer the toddler who had fearlessly approached a frightened animal, but still carrying that same pure heart. The bear huffed softly in greeting. Then, with deliberate care, she placed something on the ground between them, a perfect honeycomb, golden and dripping with sweetness. A gift from one mother's daughter to another. Lily smiled through her tears. Some bonds once formed never truly break, not even those between a wild bear and the child who once offered kindness when everyone else offered fear. As Lily carried the honeycomb back to the village, whispers seemed to follow her through the trees. Not threatening, but watchful. The forest had always spoken to her in ways she couldn't explain to others, even to Jacob and Savannah. It was as though she could feel the pulse of life beneath the soil, the silent communication between ancient trees, the memories stored in stone and stream. The village had changed in the 18 years since that fateful day. Meadow Creek had grown prosperous, its reputation for unusually abundant harvests and strangely peaceful relations with the forest drawing new settlers and visitors. The small collection of cottages had expanded into a thriving community, with a proper schoolhouse where Savannah now taught the village children about plants and animals. Connor Adams had become mayor after old Mayor Wilson had passed 5 winters ago. His first act had been to establish the Forest Protection Decree, forbidding overhunting and requiring that for every tree cut, 2 saplings must be planted. Though some had grumbled about the restrictions, no one could deny that since the bear incident years ago, respecting the forest had brought nothing but prosperity to Meadow Creek. "There's the birthday girl," Michael Hayes called out as Lily entered the village square. Now, the community's master blacksmith following his father's retirement, Michael had grown into a powerfully built man with kind eyes. He had made no secret of his admiration for Lily in recent years, though she had gently kept him at a friendly distance. "Where did you wander off to this time?" he asked, falling into step beside her. His eyes widened at the golden honeycomb in her hands. "That's the most perfect comb I've ever seen. Where did you find it?" Lily smiled but didn't answer directly. Though the story of the mother bear was well known in Meadow Creek, her continued connection with the aging creature remained largely her own secret. "The forest provides for those who respect it," she said instead, the phrase a common saying in the village now. Michael looked at her curiously. "You know, sometimes I think you're more forest than village, Lily Morgan." "Is that such a bad thing?" she asked, her blue eyes reflecting the afternoon light. "Not bad at all," Michael replied softly. "Just rare." The village had prepared a magnificent celebration for Lily's 18th birthday. Tables laden with food filled the square, and lanterns hung from every post in preparation for the evening festivities. Children ran about with flower garlands, and musicians tuned their instruments near the newly built dance floor. Jacob met her at the edge of the square, his once youthful face now lined with the responsibilities of fatherhood and village leadership. As head of the Meadow Creek Council, he had become known for his wisdom and fairness, qualities he often credited Lily with teaching him. "There you are," he said, embracing her. Savannah was starting to worry. His eyes fell to the honeycomb, and something knowing passed across his face. "An old friend?" Lily nodded. "She remembers." Jacob squeezed her shoulder. "Of course she does. Some things change a soul forever." Before Lily could respond, 2 small whirlwinds crashed into her legs. Her 10-year-old brother Noah and 8-year-old sister Emma. "Lily, Uncle Connor says we can't have cake until you come," Emma complained, her dark braids bouncing as she tugged at Lily's skirt. "And Grandma Wilson wants to tell your bear story again," Noah added, rolling his eyes. Though he had heard the tale hundreds of times, the children of Meadow Creek never tired of the legend of the baby and the bear. "Then we mustn't keep them waiting," Lily laughed, allowing herself to be pulled toward the celebration. As twilight fell and lanterns glowed against the darkening sky, the village gathered to honor their most cherished daughter. Old Mrs. Wilson, now nearly 100 years old and bent like an ancient tree root, sat in the place of honor beside Lily. Though her eyes had clouded with age and her hearing had faded, her mind remained as sharp as ever. "Tonight marks not just a birthday," Connor announced to the gathered crowd, "but a reminder of the day that changed Meadow Creek forever. 18 years ago, a frightened bear and a fearless child taught us that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources." The villagers raised their cups in a toast as Connor continued. "Lily Morgan, you've been our village's blessing. May your 18th year bring you as much joy as you've brought us." Music and dancing followed the feast, with Lily being passed from partner to partner, as was the village tradition for coming-of-age celebrations. As the night grew later, she found herself in need of quiet and slipped away from the revelry, heading toward the small pond at the edge of the village. There, beneath a willow tree, she found an unexpected visitor, a traveler she had noticed earlier sitting quietly at the back of the celebration. He was older than her, perhaps 30, with dark hair streaked prematurely with silver and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. His clothes marked him as someone who had journeyed far. Sturdy leather boots worn from miles of walking, a pack that had weathered many storms. "I'm sorry," he said, rising quickly when he noticed her approach. "I didn't mean to intrude on your celebration." "You're not intruding," Lily assured him. "Sometimes festivities can become overwhelming, even when they're in your honor." The stranger nodded, understanding in his gaze. "I'm Ethan," he said, "Ethan Marshall." "The scholar from the Eastern College?" Lily asked, recognition dawning. "Connor mentioned you had come to learn about our forest practices." "Yes, though I've found myself more interested in your village's stories," Ethan admitted. "Particularly yours." Lily sat on a stone bench near the water's edge, smoothing her celebration dress. "My story has grown with each telling, I suspect. Villages love their legends." "But at its core, it's true," Ethan said. Not a question, but a statement. "You were that baby who approached the bear." "I was," Lily confirmed, "though I remember it only in flashes, more feeling than clear memory." Ethan hesitated, then asked, "May I sit with you a moment? There's something I'd like to ask you." Lily nodded, curious about this scholarly stranger who seemed different from the usual travelers seeking Meadow Creek's prosperity secrets. "I've been studying something," Ethan began carefully, sitting beside her but maintaining a respectful distance. "Across the northern regions, there are stories, Old stories that predate our grandparents' grandparents, about certain people who can commune with the forest and its creatures. People born with a special connection to the natural world. Lily kept her expression neutral, though her heart quickened. No one had ever spoken so directly about the things she felt but could not explain. The Eastern College calls them forest speakers, Ethan continued. The ancient texts describe them as bridges between human settlements and the wilderness, people who can understand the needs of both worlds and help them exist in harmony. "And you think I'm one of these forest speakers?" Lily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ethan turned to face her fully, his expression earnest. "I think the evidence suggests it strongly. Your village has prospered remarkably since your encounter with the bear. Your forest remains healthy while others are depleted. Even the weather patterns here seem more favorable than in surrounding regions." He gestured toward the celebration in the distance. "And I've watched how the villagers look at you, not just with affection, but with a kind of reverence, as though they sense something special about you, even if they don't have the words for it." Lily was silent for a long moment, watching the reflection of the moon rippling on the pond's surface. Finally, she said, "I've never told anyone this, but I can feel things. In the forest. It's like hearing a conversation just beyond the range of understanding, except sometimes I do understand." The admission, spoken aloud for the first time, felt both frightening and freeing. Lily continued, the words flowing now that the dam had broken. "The old mother bear. We still have a connection. She's taught me things about the forest. And sometimes, when I walk among the trees, I know exactly which plants will heal, which fruits are safe to eat, where the game will be plentiful. Just as the ancient texts describe," Ethan said softly, excitement and wonder mingling in his voice. "Lily, there are others like you, not many, perhaps one born in a generation, but they exist. The college has been trying to find them, to learn from them, to understand this rare gift." "Why?" Lily asked, suddenly wary. "What would they do with such knowledge?" "To preserve it," Ethan explained. "We live in changing times. Many forests are being cleared for expanding settlements. The old ways of living in balance with nature are being forgotten. The college believes that forest speakers may be our last hope for teaching people how to exist alongside the wilderness without destroying it." A rustle in the nearby bushes interrupted their conversation. Lily wasn't startled. She had sensed the presence approaching even before the sound revealed it. A large, graying bear emerged from the shadows, her movements slow with age but still powerful. Ethan tensed, instinctively drawing back, but Lily placed a calming hand on his arm. "It's all right," she said quietly. "She's just curious about you." The mother bear stopped several yards away, studying the stranger with intelligent eyes that reflected the moonlight. After a moment, she huffed softly and settled onto her haunches, watching them with what could only be described as patience. "This is the same bear from your story?" Ethan whispered, amazement evident in his voice. Lily nodded. "She's old now. Her cubs have cubs of their own. But she still watches over Meadow Creek, over me." The bear made a low rumbling sound in her throat, almost like speech. Without thinking, Lily responded with a similar sound, the vocalization coming naturally to her. Ethan's eyes widened. "You can communicate with her." "Not with words," Lily explained, "but in feelings, intentions. She understands more than you might expect, and I've learned to understand her too." She smiled slightly. "She thinks you smell like distant places and old paper." The mother bear rose and approached closer, each movement deliberate. When she was just a few feet away, she extended her massive head toward Ethan, sniffing the air around him. Don't move, Lily advised. She's deciding whether you're trustworthy. And if she decides I'm not? Ethan asked, remarkably calm despite the proximity of the enormous predator. Then our conversation would end rather abruptly, Lily said with unexpected humor. But I don't think that will happen. She trusts my judgment, and I've sensed no danger from you. After what seemed an eternity, the bear huffed again and backed away, returning to her position at the edge of the clearing. Ethan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was extraordinary, he said. In all my research, I've never witnessed such interaction firsthand. Lily's attention had shifted to the bear, whose posture had changed subtly. She's trying to tell me something, she murmured, rising from the bench. Something's wrong. The mother bear turned her head toward the forest, making a series of urgent sounds. Lily stepped closer, concentrating on the feelings flowing between them: concern, warning, a sense of approaching trouble. What is it? Ethan asked, watching this silent communication with fascination. I'm not sure yet, Lily replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. But something's coming, something that threatens the forest. As if in confirmation, a distant sound reached them, the rumble of heavy wagons approaching from the eastern road, unusual at this late hour. The mother bear growled softly, her aging body tensing with protective instinct. Timber merchants, Lily whispered, the knowledge coming to her with certainty, though she couldn't explain how she knew. They've been cutting in the eastern forests, and now they've set their sights on ours. Ethan's expression hardened. The Blackwood Company. They must be. They've been clearing forests across 3 counties, using royal permissions that many believe were obtained through bribery. The bear rose up on her hind legs briefly, her full height impressive despite her age, then dropped back down with a decisive huff. With one last meaningful look at Lily, she melted back into the forest shadows. She's going to gather her family, Lily said, understanding the bear's intention. They'll watch these strangers, but they won't reveal themselves unless necessary. Ethan looked at her with new respect and urgency. Lily, this may be exactly why I was meant to find you. The college has been fighting the Blackwood Company's expansion, gathering evidence of their corrupt practices and the damage they've done. But we need more than documents and testimonies. We need to show people a different way forward. He took her hands impulsively. Come with me to the college. Help us protect not just your forest, but forests everywhere. Your gift, your connection to the natural world, could change how people think about wilderness. Lily pulled her hands away gently, conflicted. This is my home, Ethan. My family is here. Everything I know is Meadow Creek and these woods. I understand, he said, his disappointment evident but respectful. But at least speak with the timber merchants before they begin cutting. Perhaps you can convince them to spare these woods. A call from the village interrupted them. Jacob's voice, searching for his niece. The celebration was reaching its culmination, and Lily was needed for the final birthday ritual. I should go, she said, torn between the festivities and this new, unexpected challenge. But we'll speak more of this tomorrow. The timber merchants won't begin work at night. As Lily hurried back toward the lights and music of the village, Ethan called after her. The college believes that forest speakers aren't just born by chance, Lily. The gift appears where and when it's most needed. Perhaps you were given this connection for a greater purpose than just one village and one bear. His words followed her like a shadow as she rejoined her celebration, smiling and participating in the traditions while her mind raced with new possibilities and approaching threats. The following dawn broke with unusual color. streaks of vibrant purple and deep orange painting the sky in what the village elders would call a warning sunrise. Lily, who had slept little after the revelations of the previous night, was already awake and watching from her window when the first wagon of the Blackwood Company rolled into Meadow Creek. 5 large wagons in total entered the village, each pulled by teams of sturdy draft horses and laden with equipment: axes, saws, ropes, and iron tools that gleamed coldly in the early light. Men with weathered faces and hard eyes jumped down from the wagons, stretching after their journey as their leader, a barrel-chested man with a thick beard, approached the village center. Jacob and Connor, alerted to the arrival, met them in the square. Lily dressed quickly and hurried to join them, passing Ethan, who was already there, watching the proceedings with a guarded expression. "Good morning, gentlemen," the bearded man called out jovially, though his eyes remained calculating. "Logan Carter, foreman of the Blackwood Company, at your service. We bring good news for your little village." "We weren't expecting timber merchants," Jacob said carefully, his posture tense but diplomatic. "What brings Blackwood to Meadow Creek?" Logan produced an official-looking document with elaborate seals. "Royal Commission, my friend. We've been granted rights to harvest timber throughout this county, including your rather impressive forest here." He smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "But fear not. We'll be bringing prosperity to Meadow Creek. We'll need local workers, supplies, food, all of which we'll pay good coin for." Connor stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Our forest is protected by village decree. We have a sustainable harvesting system that has served us well for generations." Logan laughed, the sound lacking genuine humor. "Village decrees are charming, but meaningless against Royal Commission, friend. Besides, you're sitting on a fortune in timber. We're doing you a favor by bringing proper industry to this backwater." Lily felt a ripple of anger move through the growing crowd of villagers who had gathered to witness the exchange. Meadow Creek had never taken kindly to outsiders dismissing their ways. "Perhaps," she said, stepping forward, "you'd like to understand our forest management practices before you begin cutting. We've developed methods that provide timber while maintaining the health of the forest itself." Logan's eyes raked over her appreciatively, in a way that made her skin crawl. "And who might you be, lovely?" "Lily Morgan," Jacob answered for her, his protective instinct evident. "My niece and our village's forest expert." Recognition flickered in Logan's eyes. "Ah, the bear girl from the stories. Charming." He turned his attention back to Jacob and Connor. "Look, we can do this pleasantly or not. The commission gives us right-of-way and harvesting authority. We begin work tomorrow at first light, starting with the eastern ridge where the largest oaks grow." Lily felt her heart sink. The eastern ridge was home to the oldest trees in the forest, ancient giants that had stood for hundreds of years. It was also the area where the mother bear's extended family had their dens. "You can't cut there," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Those trees are hundreds of years old, and the area is vital wildlife habitat." Logan's false friendliness faded. "I don't take instruction from village girls no matter what cute animal stories they star in. The Eastern Ridge timber is premium grade and will fetch top price in the capital." Ethan stepped forward then, his scholarly demeanor shifting to something more authoritative. "The Eastern College has documented the ecological importance of old-growth forests, like the one on the Eastern Ridge. Cutting those trees would violate multiple conservation principles recognized by the Royal Science Council." "And you are?" Logan asked, irritation evident. "Ethan Marshall, Eastern College Research Fellow," he replied coolly, "currently documenting sustainable forestry practices in successful communities, like Meadow Creek." A flicker of unease crossed Logan's face at the mention of the prestigious college, but he recovered quickly. "Well, Professor, you can document all you want, but this commission gives us legal right to harvest, unless you've got a royal decree that says otherwise." The standoff was interrupted by a strange sound, a deep, rhythmic huffing that echoed from the forest edge. Villagers turned to see an extraordinary sight. The mother bear stood at the tree line, fully visible in daylight, and she was not alone. Behind her, partially obscured by underbrush and shadow, were at least a dozen bears of various sizes, her extended family, gathered as if in council. The timber workers reached for weapons instinctively, but Logan held up his hand. "Don't shoot unless they charge. Bears are worth good bounty, but I don't want to waste ammunition on a curious pack." "They're not a pack," Lily said quietly. "They're a family, and they're protecting their home, just as we are." The mother bear rose onto her hind legs, her graying muzzle pointed skyward, as she released a deep, rumbling call that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath their feet. The other bears remained still, watching, waiting. "Impressive theatrics," Logan sneered, though Lily noticed his hand had moved to the pistol at his belt. "But bears don't hold deeds, and sentiment doesn't build kingdoms." Jacob stepped closer to the foreman, lowering his voice. "Mr. Carter, I suggest you and your men take some time to rest in the village. Let us show you our forestry methods. Perhaps we can reach a compromise that satisfies both your commission and our need to protect the older sections of forest." Logan considered this, his eyes moving from the bears to the increasingly hostile villagers and back to the official document in his hand. Finally, he nodded curtly. "One day," he conceded. "We'll inspect your methods and consider adjustments to our cutting plan. But make no mistake, we will harvest timber from these woods by order of the Crown." As the timbermen moved toward the village inn, the gathered bears began to disperse, melting back into the forest one by one, until only the old mother remained. She dropped to all fours and held Lily's gaze for a long moment before she too disappeared among the trees. "What just happened?" Michael whispered, coming to stand beside Lily. "Did you call them?" Lily shook her head, though the truth was more complicated. She hadn't called the bears, but she had felt their gathering, had somehow known they would come. "They protect what they love," she said simply, "just as we do." Ethan approached, his expression troubled. "We've bought a day at most. The Blackwood Company isn't known for compromise, regardless of what your uncle hopes." He lowered his voice. "Lily, there's something I didn't tell you last night. The college has evidence that Blackwood's royal commission may be fraudulent, obtained through bribery and falsified documents, but we need more time to get proof from the capital." "Then we'll give you that time," Lily decided, a plan forming in her mind. "We'll show Logan and his men every inch of our forest management system, the most boring, detailed tour imaginable. We'll extend every courtesy, every explanation, until your proof arrives." Jacob joined them, having overheard the last part of their conversation. "It won't be enough," he said grimly. "I've seen men like Logan before. They take what they want and justify it later." Lily looked toward the forest, feeling a strange certainty growing within her. "Then we'll need help from older and wiser defenders." That night, while the timbermen drank and boasted at the village inn, Lily slipped away to the forest. She carried nothing but a small lantern and wore a simple dress that allowed her to move silently between the ancient trees. She knew where she needed to go, the massive oak at the center of the eastern ridge, a tree so old that its trunk would take 10 people joining hands to encircle it. When she reached the great oak, she extinguished her lantern and waited in the darkness. The forest sounds enveloped her. The soft hooting of owls, the rustling of small creatures in the underbrush, the whispering of leaves in the gentle night breeze. She placed her palm against the rough bark of the ancient tree and closed her eyes. "I need your help," she whispered, feeling slightly foolish speaking aloud to a tree, yet certain somehow that this was right. "All of you. The forest is in danger." A warm sensation spread through her palm into her arm, as though the tree's slow heartbeat had synchronized with her own. Lily felt a strange shifting in her mind, like veils being drawn aside to reveal something that had always been present, but just beyond her perception. Suddenly, she could sense them all, every tree, every plant, every living thing in the forest, as a vast interconnected web of life. The awareness was overwhelming, a symphony of existence that brought tears to her eyes. Within this web, she felt the bears, too, their presences like bright flames of consciousness moving through the green tapestry of the forest mind. And there was something else, ancient, patient, impossibly vast. The collective awareness of the old trees, a slow-thinking but powerful intelligence that had watched centuries pass like mere seasons. Lily gasped as understanding flooded her. This was what it meant to be a forest speaker, not just communion with animals, but with the entire living system of the forest itself. The mother bear had been her first teacher, opening the door to this greater awareness, but this connection had always been her birthright. "They come with metal teeth to take your children," she said to the great oak, knowing now that it could understand her in its own way. "They have paper with royal seals, but no understanding of what they destroy." The massive tree seemed to shudder slightly, though no wind blew. Lily felt rather than heard its response, a slow, deep anger tinged with resolution. The forest would defend itself, but it needed her to be its voice, its hands among the fast-moving human world. The mother bear emerged from the shadows, somehow unsurprised to find Lily communing with the ancient oak. She huffed softly and settled her aging body at the base of the tree beside the young woman. Together, they remained through the night, as Lily listened to the whispered wisdom of countless leaves and roots and learned what needed to be done. Dawn found Meadow Creek in a state of uneasy tension. The timbermen prepared their equipment while villagers watched with barely concealed hostility. Logan Carter strutted about, issuing orders and making a show of consulting his official documents. "We begin with a survey of the eastern ridge," he announced. "My men will mark the prime cutting zones and work can commence tomorrow." "Actually," Jacob interjected smoothly, "we've arranged a comprehensive tour of our sustainable forestry practices first, as agreed yesterday." Logan's face darkened with impatience. "A brief tour, then. I have quotas to meet." As the reluctant timbermen gathered, Lily appeared at the edge of the village, dressed differently than the villagers had ever seen her. She wore a simple green dress adorned with oak leaves and wild flowers, and her usually loose blonde hair was braided with twigs and small blossoms. Around her neck hung the honeycomb the mother bear had gifted her, now preserved in a wooden frame. "I'll be leading the tour," she announced, her voice carrying a new authority that made even Logan pause. "If you're to cut in our forest, you should understand what you're cutting." Before Logan could object, Savannah stepped forward. "The forest paths can be treacherous for those who don't know them. Lily knows every root and stone." Ethan, watching from nearby, saw something in Lily's eyes that hadn't been there before. A deeper awareness. An ancient patience that reminded him of descriptions in the college's oldest texts about forest speakers who had fully awakened to their gifts. The tour began at the village edge, where Lily showed the timbermen the youngest trees, saplings planted in careful rows. We plant 3 trees for every one we harvest, she explained, and we select which mature trees to cut based on the overall health of the forest, not just size or timber quality. Logan made a show of checking his timepiece every few minutes, but his men seemed genuinely interested in Meadow Creek's methods. As the tour continued deeper into the woods, Lily led them along winding paths that somehow seemed to take much longer than they should have. "Notice how we thin selectively here," she said, gesturing to a grove of middle-aged maples. "This allows sunlight to reach the forest floor, encouraging diverse plant growth which supports wildlife and prevents soil erosion." Hour after hour, she led them through the forest, deliberately avoiding the eastern ridge while explaining every aspect of Meadow Creek's forestry practices in exhaustive detail. Whenever Logan tried to direct them toward the valuable old-growth areas, Lily would discover some fascinating example of sustainable harvesting that required inspection in the opposite direction. By mid-afternoon, Logan's patience had worn thin. "Enough of this tour," he snapped. "We've seen your charming little system. Now, take us to the eastern ridge where the real timber is." Lily nodded calmly. "Of course, it's just this way." But as she led them toward the ridge, strange things began to happen. Paths that had been clear became suddenly overgrown. Familiar landmarks seemed to have shifted position. Trees that should have been widely spaced appeared to grow closer together, making passage difficult for the larger men. "What kind of game is this?" Logan demanded, as they struggled through yet another unexpected thicket. "The ridge should be right here according to our maps." "The forest can be confusing for those unfamiliar with it," Lily said innocently. "Perhaps we've taken a wrong turn." Ethan, who had joined the tour, noticed something extraordinary. The forest itself seemed to be rearranging subtly around them, leading them in circles despite Logan's increasingly frustrated attempts to navigate by compass and map. As twilight approached, Logan finally admitted defeat. "We'll return to the village for now," he growled. "But tomorrow we bring our own guides and cut straight through to the ridge if necessary." When they emerged from the forest, the timbermen were shocked to find themselves on the opposite side of Meadow Creek from where they'd entered the woods hours before. "Impossible," Logan muttered, staring at his map in disbelief. "We should have come out miles from here." Lily merely smiled. "The forest has its own sense of direction sometimes." That evening, as the frustrated timbermen once again took rooms at the inn, the village council gathered at Jacob's home with Ethan and Lily. "How did you do that?" Connor asked Lily with amazement. "I've hunted these woods my entire life, and even I got turned around today." Lily exchanged a glance with Ethan before answering. "I didn't do it, the forest did." "What does that mean?" Jacob asked, concern evident in his voice. Ethan spoke up. "It means Lily is indeed what the college calls a forest speaker, someone who can communicate with the natural world in ways most humans cannot. But this is beyond even what our texts describe. The forest responded to her, protected itself through her." "Is this magic?" Savannah asked hesitantly. "Not magic," Lily said gently. "Connection. The forest is alive, not just the individual trees and animals, but as a whole living system. Last night, I finally understood what I've been feeling my entire life. The great oak helped me see." Jacob studied his niece's face, noting the subtle changes. A depth in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A centeredness in her posture. A quiet confidence that went beyond her 18 years. "Can you control it?" he asked finally. "This connection?" "Not control," Lily corrected. "Guide, perhaps. The forest has its own will, but it recognizes me as part of itself, and it will listen if the cause is just." "Logan won't give up so easily," Connor warned. He'll bring more men, more equipment. He might even send for soldiers if he thinks we're interfering with a royal commission." Ethan nodded grimly. The Blackwood Company has influence in the capital. Even if their commission is fraudulent, they can make things very difficult for Meadow Creek. "Then we need to buy more time," Jacob decided. "How long until your college can get proof of the fraud?" "A week, perhaps 2, Ethan estimated. "My colleagues are searching the Royal Archives now, but these things move slowly." Lily rose from her chair, a plan forming in her mind. "I can give us that time," she said with certainty, "but I'll need everyone's trust." The following morning, Logan Carter and his increasingly uneasy men prepared to set out again, this time armed with better maps and several lengths of rope to mark their trail. "No more games," Logan warned Jacob and Connor as the village watched tensely. "We cut straight to the eastern ridge today, or there will be consequences." Before anyone could respond, a commotion at the forest edge drew everyone's attention. Emerging from the trees came the most extraordinary procession Meadow Creek had ever witnessed. The old mother bear led the way, her silver-flecked fur gleaming in the morning light. Behind her walked Lily, her simple green dress now adorned with living vines that seemed to shift and grow as she moved. But it was what followed them that caused gasps and cries of astonishment. Animals of every kind native to the forest walked together in an impossible harmony. Deer beside wolves, foxes alongside rabbits, hawks perched on the antlers of great stags. They moved as a single entity, predator and prey alike, into the village square. "What devilry is this?" one of the timbermen cried, crossing himself hastily. Logan reached for his pistol, but froze when the mother bear fixed her gaze upon him, her ancient eyes reflecting an intelligence that could not be mistaken for mere animal instinct. "This is no devilry," Lily said, her voice carrying clearly across the hushed square. "This is the voice of the forest itself, come to speak with you." The gathered animals formed a semicircle behind Lily and the bear, creating a living wall of wild eyes and alert ears. The sight was so extraordinary, so contrary to natural law, that even the most skeptical observers could not deny something miraculous was unfolding. "The forest has stood here since before the first human settlements," Lily continued, seeming to speak not entirely with her own voice. "It has provided timber for your homes, food for your tables, medicine for your sick. It has given freely, asking only that you take with respect and understanding." The mother bear huffed softly, nudging Lily's hand as if in encouragement. "Your commission, whether true or false, comes from human authority," Lily went on, addressing Logan directly. "But there is an older authority here, the right of ancient things to exist, the balance that sustains all life." She gestured to the animals surrounding her. "These creatures are not here to threaten you, but to be witnessed, to remind you that a forest is not merely timber waiting to be harvested, but a community of living beings." Logan had recovered enough of his composure to scoff, though his hand still hovered near his weapon. "Pretty speech, girl, but sentiment doesn't change my orders or the value of that timber." "Then perhaps this will," Ethan said, stepping forward with a sealed document in hand. This arrived by special messenger just after dawn. He handed the document to Logan, whose face paled as he read the official seal. "This is from the Royal Forestry Commission." "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "A temporary stay on all timber operations in this region, pending investigation of certain irregularities in your company's commission." Logan's face contorted with rage. "This is your doing," he snarled at Ethan. "Your college has friends in high places, but this isn't over. Blackwood has investments to protect." In a sudden movement, he drew his pistol and aimed it not at Ethan or Lily, but at the old mother bear. If I can't have the timber, I'll at least take a trophy worth something." Several things happened at once. The gathered animals surged forward protectively. Villagers shouted in alarm. Ethan lunged toward Logan. But fastest of all was Lily, who stepped directly in front of the mother bear, her arms outstretched. "No," she cried, her voice ringing with power that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. The pistol fired with a deafening crack. Time seemed to slow. Lily felt a burning pain blossom in her shoulder as the ball struck her instead of its intended target. She staggered, but remained standing, her blood seeping into the green dress, staining the living vines that adorned it. The forest's response was immediate and overwhelming. The ground beneath Logan's feet suddenly split and twisted, roots erupting from the soil to wrap around his legs. The pistol fell from his hand as he struggled against the wooden bonds that held him immobile. Trees at the forest edge bent inward, their branches reaching toward the village square like grasping fingers. A great wind rose from nowhere, swirling leaves and dust around the timber men, who dropped their weapons and fell to their knees in terror. "Lily!" Jacob cried, rushing to his niece as she swayed on her feet, one hand pressed to her bleeding shoulder. The mother bear roared, a sound of grief and rage that shook windows and sent birds exploding into the sky from distant trees. She reared up on her hind legs, towering over everyone, her ancient eyes fixed on Logan with unmistakable intent. "Wait," Lily gasped, reaching out with her uninjured arm to touch the bear's fur. "No more violence. Please." The massive creature hesitated, torn between vengeance and the plea of her human friend. After a long, tense moment, she dropped back to all fours and moved to Lily's side, supporting her as the young woman's strength began to fail. "Get her to the healer's cottage," Savannah ordered, taking charge. "Quickly!" As Jacob lifted Lily into his arms, the strange procession of forest animals parted to let them through, then began to disperse, returning to the woods as mysteriously as they had appeared. Only the mother bear remained, following closely as they carried Lily away. The next 3 days passed in anxious vigil. Lily burned with fever as infection set in, her wound resisting traditional treatments. The mother bear refused to leave, maintaining a constant watch outside the healer's cottage window, even as village dogs barked and children whispered in awe. Logan and his men were confined to the inn under guard until royal officers could arrive to investigate the fraudulent commission and the assault on Lily. Ethan sent urgent messages to the college, requesting their most knowledgeable healers. On the evening of the 3rd day, when hope was beginning to fade, the mother bear suddenly raised her head and huffed loudly. Before anyone could stop her, she pushed through the cottage door, her massive frame barely fitting through the opening. "Let her pass," old Mrs. Wilson commanded when Jacob moved to intervene. "She knows something we don't." The ancient bear approached Lily's bedside, where the young woman lay pale and still, her breathing shallow. With surprising gentleness, the bear nuzzled Lily's uninjured shoulder, then turned and left as abruptly as she had entered. Hours later, as dawn approached, the bear returned. This time, she carried something carefully in her mouth. A rare blue flower that grew only on the highest ridges, in places humans rarely ventured. She deposited it beside Lily's bed and looked expectantly at Savannah. "Forest hemlock star," Savannah whispered, recognizing the flower. "It's said to draw poison and fever, but I've never found one myself. They bloom only once every 10 years. Following ancient wisdom passed through generations, Savannah prepared a poultice from the precious flower. As she applied it to Lily's wound, the young woman's breathing eased, her feverish movements calming. By midday, the fever had broken. By evening, Lily opened her eyes. The bear? she asked weakly, her first words since being shot. Outside, Jacob assured her, tears of relief streaming down his weathered face. She hasn't left since you were hurt. Days turned to weeks. The royal investigators came and went, taking Logan and his men to face justice in the capital. The Blackwood Company's fraudulent practices were exposed, and a new permanent protection was granted to the forests around Meadow Creek. Ethan remained in the village, documenting Lily's remarkable connection with the forest and sending regular reports to the college. What had begun as academic research had become something much more personal, as his admiration for Lily deepened into love. As autumn painted the forest in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Lily's strength returned. On the first day she felt strong enough to walk to the forest edge, she found Ethan waiting for her. "The college has asked me to extend an invitation," he said, his voice gentle with understanding. "They would be honored to have you visit, to share your knowledge with others who seek to protect the wild places of the world." Lily looked toward the trees, feeling the constant presence of the forest in her mind, a vast, patient consciousness that had become as much a part of her as her own thoughts. "I will visit," she said after a long moment, "but my place is here where I can guard the balance between village and forest, where I can teach children to listen to the wisdom of ancient things." Ethan nodded, having expected this answer. "And my place," he said, taking her hand carefully, "if you'll have me, is wherever you are." Before she could respond, a familiar huffing sound drew their attention. The mother bear emerged from the underbrush, moving slowly with the weight of her years. Behind her came two younger bears, her youngest cubs, now nearly grown. "She's brought her children to meet you properly," Lily said with a smile, the words coming to her through their special connection. To Ethan's amazement, the two younger bears approached cautiously, allowing Lily to touch their fur before they retreated to their mother's side. The old bear waited until they had withdrawn, then moved forward to stand before Lily. Their eyes met in silent communion, human and bear, two mothers of different kinds, united by bonds that transcended the ordinary boundaries between species. In that moment, Lily understood what the bear had come to tell her. "She's saying goodbye," Lily whispered, tears filling her eyes. "She's old, and the winter will be hard. She won't see another spring." The mother bear huffed softly, nudging Lily's hand one last time. In that touch flowed decades of wild wisdom, memories of forests that had stood for centuries, knowledge of roots and stars and the turning of seasons. The bear was entrusting her legacy to Lily, not just protection of her family, but guardianship of the delicate balance between human and wilderness. "I understand," Lily said, kneeling to embrace the massive creature who had changed her life so many years before. "I will watch over them, as you watched over me." The mother bear's fur was warm beneath her fingers, the strong heart beating steadily against her cheek. For a brief, transcendent moment, the boundaries between them dissolved completely. Bear and woman, forest and village, wild and tame, all merging into a single understanding of life's interconnected web. When Lily finally stepped back, tears streaming freely down her face, the mother bear turned toward the forest. Her cubs followed as she lumbered with dignity into the shadows beneath the ancient trees. At the edge of sight, she paused and looked back one final time, her gaze finding Lily across the distance. No words passed between them, no sounds, just a profound acknowledgement of a journey shared. A journey that had begun with a frightened bear trapped in a village square and a fearless child offering kindness when others offered fear. The first snow fell early that year, blanketing Meadow Creek in pristine white. Lily felt the moment the mother bear's spirit left her aged body, a ripple passing through the forest consciousness, a great light dimming but not disappearing as it merged back into the greater awareness of the woods. That night, Lily dreamed of running on 4 paws through moonlit forests, of cubs tumbling in spring meadows, of salmon caught in clear streams, and of a tiny human child offering a honeyed biscuit when all seemed lost. She woke with tears on her cheeks, but peace in her heart. The following spring, when the snows melted and new life burst from the awakening earth, Lily and Ethan married beneath the great oak on the eastern ridge. The ceremony was witnessed not only by the villagers of Meadow Creek, but by countless silent forest observers. Deer standing at respectful distances, birds singing from overhead branches, and a circle of bears watching from the shadows. As Lily spoke her vows, a sudden breeze stirred the new leaves overhead, sending dappled sunlight dancing across the gathering. Many would later swear they heard a distinctive huffing sound carried on that wind, the approving voice of a guardian whose legacy lived on in the harmony between forest and village. Years passed. Lily and Ethan had 3 children who grew up understanding the delicate balance of the world around them. The oldest, a daughter with her mother's blue eyes and curious spirit, showed signs of sharing Lily's gift, pausing sometimes to listen to voices only she could hear, speaking gently to wild creatures that should have fled, but instead drew near. Meadow Creek prospered, becoming known throughout the realm as a place where humans and wilderness thrived together. Scholars from the college came regularly to learn from Lily, carrying her wisdom back to influence policy and protection for forests everywhere. On her 50th birthday, Lily walked alone to the place where the mother bear had made her final den. A new oak sapling had taken root there, already growing straight and strong. Lily placed her hand on its slender trunk, feeling the flow of life within it, and something more. Something familiar in the pattern of its energy, in the particular way its leaves rustled in the breeze. "Hello, old friend," she whispered, a smile lighting her still beautiful face. Different shape, same spirit. The sapling's leaves shimmered in response, though no wind blew. Some bonds, once formed, never truly break, not even those between a human and a bear, between a village and a forest, between love offered and love returned. They simply transform, like all living things, finding new expressions in the eternal cycle of life. And if visitors to Meadow Creek found it strange that bears never troubled their livestock, that the surrounding forests remained vibrant while others withered, that children played without fear at the edge of wilderness, well, they simply hadn't heard the story of a mother bear who got trapped in the village and what one baby did that put everyone in tears. A story that would be told, in one form or another, as long as trees grew and bears roamed, and humans remembered that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the most unexpected places, from the innocence of a child, from the heart of a wild creature, from the ancient, patient consciousness of the living world that sustains us all.